Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Okay, meanwhile, on Sunday, the National Weather Service had to issue a statement correcting the president's claim that the state of Alabama was at risk from Hurricane Dorian. And yet on Monday, Trump insisted on Twitter that his claim had been true. And then, when the president today held a briefing on the storm in the Oval Office, he showcased the map you're seeing here, this map from last Thursday, showing the projected path of the storm. Now, this map he showed today appeared to be edited by hand with a Sharpie marker. It shows that someone seems to have extended the region impacted by Dorian west, at least potentially impacted, to include Alabama. We don't know exactly what happened here, who drew that line, exactly what's going on. But here is what the president said when asked about the altered map later today.
I know that Alabama was in the original forecast. They thought it would get it as a piece of it. It was supposed to go, actually, we have a better map than that, which is going to be presented, where we had many lines going directly, many models, each line being a model, and they were going directly through. And in all cases, Alabama was hit, if not lightly, in some cases pretty hard.
That map that you showed us today looked like it almost had like a Sharpie. Right?
I don't know.
Now, defending the president, the White House tonight released a map that they say was given to the president on Sunday, showing the hurricane's cone of uncertainty overlapping very slightly with the state of Alabama. Additionally, the president tweeted out a map dated from a week ago showing the various paths the hurricane could have taken. I want to bring in Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press. Jonathan, I think not a topic anybody expected this morning we would be talking about. The basic question here, it appears somebody took a Sharpie and drew an addition to the cone here to send it into Alabama. Have you been able to get anything through reporting about what might have happened here?
President Trump is very fond of Sharpies, and reportedly he himself made the alteration of the map in the hours before this briefing in the Oval Office. So let's back up a step here and talk about why, while this, on one hand, this is sort of an undeniably funny event, it does matter. It is a serious thing. President's words matter. You know, what the president says or tweets can move markets, can rattle global capitals, and can really frighten the residents of a state who might then believe they're in the path of a dangerous hurricane. And in this case, this hurricane was never any really threat to Alabama, certainly not after, a day or two of uncertainty from the National Weather Service. So what happened is, as you just walked through the chronology, the president tweeted out that Alabama was in the path. The National Weather Service had to release a rather unprecedented statement correcting the president, saying that Alabama was not in any danger. And then we've seen the president double and now triple down. So in the Oval Office today, he showed reporters that map, which was with the Sharpie alteration suggesting that Alabama had been at risk, defending his original tweet. This is time and time again, we see this from the president, that he's refusing to acknowledge any mistake. Even a relatively minor one, certainly he would just say, well, I was going off of bad information or old, outdated information.
Well, could have even said, look, maybe there was a misunderstanding here. It looked like the storm, as I was understanding it, might brush Alabama, might come close. I think that's a reasonable thing in any situation.
No question.
Not to end up here, though.
No, and any president, of course, is supposed to be, especially post-Katrina, is very mindful of the response to a hurricane. We saw how George W. Bush in 2005 really faltered, in terms of what happened with Hurricane Katrina hitting the Gulf Coast, presidents are very mindful of trying to get out ahead of it and then respond appropriately after the storm hits. But in this case, once again, he sort of made the incident about himself. And thankfully, the United States has largely, at least so far, skirted the storm, devastating the Bahamas. It hasn't, the impacts here haven't been that bad. But we've seen the president spend precious time trying to relitigate this relatively silly matter, and including tonight putting out a tweet from a Florida state source saying that showed this path more than a week old.
So this is what you're talking about now is right the map we have on the screen right here. This is what he tweeted out within the last hour?
That's right. And it's an August 28th map, which he is using to defend a September 1st tweet. And that tweet is from the Florida Water, this map here is from the Florida Water Management District website. And it says on there that information from the National Hurricane Center supersedes anything you see on this map. And as the fine print also reads, it says, if anything on this graphic causes confusion, ignore the entire product. And I think it's safe to say we've had nothing but confusion about the president handling the storm.
Let me just ask you, folks in the White House, folks around this administration, do they have any reaction to something like this?
The people we've talked to tonight, not much yet in terms of sort of a sense of a shrug and, well, there he goes again, in terms of the president being very defensive, not acknowledging, being able to acknowledge any sort of mistake, being very thin-skinned about media criticism, and certainly that's how this was brought to light, his initial mistake, because there was a report suggesting that, pointing out that his mistake, that Alabama was never under any real threat. But to a broader point, and why this does matter, in addition, not only do a president's words carry weight, but it shows you there's no one in the White House who can get in the way of something like this and say, sir, this might be a bad idea. Like, this isn't worth your time and energy to double and then triple down on what was probably an innocent mistake, a bad piece of information or an outdated piece of information. There's no one there who can say to him, sir, this is a bad idea. There are no guardrails left. There are very few people in that White House who have any standing or any courage or any willingness to step up to him. And maybe this is a trivial matter, but they also don't on rather important ones.
I ask you to wander over to the table for some of this. It feels like this is the kind of storm that changes by the minute.
It does.
It's been going on a long time. We talked yesterday about a little bit of fatigue, and I just, not to pull you into the political conversation here, but this is a president who, since the day he was inaugurated, even before, has been screaming fake news from the top of his lungs. I just want to get you on the record of what the trusted sources of information are for people who may be concerned and who may now have in circulation. You said you tweeted out the accurate picture. There is a doctored image of where the storm is not heading. A black Sharpie circling Alabama.
Which actually is against the law to put out an altered government forecast. So just throwing that out as well.
In the Oval Office, president's sitting behind the desk, resolute desk, in the Oval Office. I find this kind of like, we don't know what happened between, without, you don't have to speculate.
No, we don't know who did it.
We're
not saying who did it, but that's the president's hand on a doctored image of a storm path. And
sitting behind the desk, in the Oval Office.
The forecast you just detailed is terrifying, both in its scope, its slowness, and the kinds of dangers people are in. I mean, we've covered enough of these, and I haven't been doing this for very long to know that a power outage for an elderly community is a life and death situation.
It is Thursday, the 5th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Speaking of spice in your life, hey, I ran out of some sugar, and also I ran out of, I really need a cup of AR-15. Can you lend me a cup of AR-15, please? I just seem to be out right now, and I just can't get to the gun store. It's nice to have friends and neighbors that are so generous, isn't it? Dan Crenshaw. You know what? What a moron. God. The guy's a gun runner and admits it. Yeah, well, that's Crenshaw for you. Pandering fool. Now he's saying that, oh yeah, they only care about that in New York. Out here in the middle America, where real America is, we lend our friends our guns. I'm out in small town America, and no one does that. First of all, they're so wedded to it, literally wedded to their weaponry, they're not going to share their guns. It's like group sex. They're not going to. They don't want to touch it. It's been dirtied. Give me a break, Dan Crenshaw. And now he says, "Oh yeah, we do other things like read the Bible." Pandering mofo Crenshaw, hiding behind that old trope. The guy doesn't even read the Bible. He has it. He has it on the dashboard. All right. You got to know that. He lets everybody know he's got the Bible. I know those types. Ask him a question about it, and they really won't be able to answer. All right. Well, Crenshaw's a story in and of itself, but we still have a problem with Donald Trump at war with the National Weather Service. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that the Weather Service is not only fake news, but part of the deep state conspiring to bring down Donald Trump. All right. There's got to be a basement in their Comet Pizza. I'm sure there is. And there's going to be people going to find it. And when they don't find it, they'll still prove it's there. That's how cults work. We're looking at a group right now just before the Kool-Aid party. And I would say any fact-finding mission that we think that we're going to go in there is going to turn out really bad. We've seen this before. Don't go. Please. It won't end out well. It won't, ever. I don't know. What do we just... We can't ignore it. Because these people refuse to be ignored. And if we ignore it, they're still going to push whatever it is that... I don't know. Is it just to own the libs? It has to be. That's the main impetus for their, or motivation, outside of, white grievance, racial animosity, That's all owning the libs. No care for the rule of law. None. Except, well, at least in my personal experience, when I've had to deal with a few of these cult members in my family, the rule of law is what they rule the law is. All right. Well, the reason that we have a representative democracy is so that we don't have individuals making up the law on the fly. This is the wholesale destruction of not only our government, but our society. I mean, my God. Look, even in a cherished pastime like baseball, I can track when this destruction of our society really sped up. I mean, it just really increased. When was that? I can point to when the designated hitter became part of baseball and the American League adopted it, and that was when Russian active measures truly took hold in America. I didn't read it in Q, all right? But it's as crazy as the stuff that they have coming out of there. Fight fire with fire, I guess. Be more crazy than the crazies? I guess that can work. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? The only way you can be crazier than the crazies is to really be sane. But the problem is that it gets so fun to be the crazy, you never get out of just making the point. That's the problem. Let's avoid that part. Well, on the rest of the menu here, of course, Trump and his altering of a weather service map is an illegal act. It is. It's even part of the code. Uh-huh. All right. Well, the laws don't apply to him. He's a sitting president. He can do anything. He can falsify a weather map on Fifth Avenue and get millions of people possibly endangered and several 100,000 killed, but they can't do anything to him because he's the president. Powers that no one ever knew a president had before. And that's because they hadn't seen those OLC memos that conveniently pop up. On the rest of the menu, Facebook told the feds that their plan to use fake accounts to track immigrants is not allowed. Violates TOU. A DOJ employees union filed a complaint with the IG that a Trump appointee is improperly influencing Justice Department crime victim grants. The corruption and its tentacles go deep. Talk about a deep state. Jeez. And government officials conceded that the State Department failed to protect its career diplomats from political reprisals by Trump henchmen. He's a mobbed-up autocrat, too. Let's not forget. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Brazil's Bolsonaro irked regional ally Chile with personal attacks on former Chilean president and current UN head, Michelle Bachelet. And the former First Lady of Honduras is sentenced to 58 years, that's 58 years, in jail on charges of fraud and undue appropriation of funds. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you. Oh, I should mention before I go on, there's a little bit of work being done on our homepage. If you have a problem getting the player to appear, I hate telling you to do this, but go up there and type that HTTPS, but only do it as HTTP, and the player will appear. It should be secured, but for some reason it's not, and we are with the vendor right now, and have been. They always move so slow. We have a ticket in. That's it, a ticket in queue. But we are in communication with the vendor, and we're trying to fix that. So remember, if the player doesn't show up on our homepage, get up there and take out that S part of HTTP. S. Take out the S. All right, to the leftish of our homepage, at the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com, on the left side is our Patreon link, and thank you for being a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you aren't already, please do. Your contribution, a small one, how about the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink once a month sent our way? We're able to stretch those dollars really beyond compare, and we have a lot of experience at it. 8 years now, our 8th anniversary of continuous 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio, and we would be unable to do so without your generosity, and we thank you. Do follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, because that is an integral part to this multimedia operation. And that's where the links are. So, the source is backed up here, really. Especially when I go off, because you need to see what the actual news story said. Because this is a salon, and we like to just, add our little 2 bits here and there. We do. And I also, you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Yeah, speaking of YouTube, something's going on with them. We're getting our analytics kind of messed up. A lot of people, a lot of the different platforms aren't really computing YouTube's metrics anymore because they don't adhere to the standard. So YouTube, how about getting your thing on the... You're really messing up with people's income stream, I noticed. How about getting your analytics with the standard? It would be nice. All right, got that out of there. Okay, let's get on with our first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. And do not dish the grits. Put the grits in the dish. Do not insult grits. Come on. Due process, even for grits. Equal protection, even for grits. Grits are truly part of the fabric of America, and I don't want to hear anyone dissing them again. Dish them all you want. Well, Lisa Needham of Share Blue Media brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services wants to create fake social media profiles so we can monitor the accounts of people seeking to enter the U.S. However, it forgot about the part where Facebook's user agreement prohibits fake accounts. The Trump administration just reversed a directive issued in 2014 that prohibited USCIS officers from creating fake accounts and identities to monitor the social media accounts of people applying for citizenship, work visas, and green cards. Because the black guy did it. Anything the black guy put in or advocated, we have to have undone. Everything. The problem is that if you tell this guy, Obama breathed oxygen, he would make it so the rest of us can't breathe oxygen. He still will. Just saying. Previously, officers were only allowed to monitor public posts. However, several social media platforms limit the amount you can interact with a platform unless you have an account. So, in its quest to be as invasive and unfair to immigrants as possible, the administration will now allow the creation of fake accounts to allow for increased access. That's small government, isn't it? According to U.S. CIS officers, aren't allowed to use the accounts to interact with users, to message, follow, or friend anyone to gather data. That doesn't seem to exclude doing things like joining groups on Facebook, however. As long as they do so without interacting. You mean like spying? Now, I'm so old, I remember going to some organizational meetings with some fairly well-known protest movement groups back in the day. And it turned out there were some cops that were undercover, keeping track of us and trying to incite us and encourage us to buy weapons and any other number of things that would be illegal so they could parade us in front of the cameras and say, these damn liberals just are out to destroy us. And look at the evidence. Talk about an Asian provocateur. Good thing some of us are smart enough to know that if somebody... I'm serious. I kid you not. There was a grand jury inquiry. I had to sit in front of it. Jesus. Cops, LAPD cops tried to sell the Young Socialist Alliance and Vietnam Veterans Against the War some peripheral members' weapons. And then tried to entrap, I guess, the rest of the organizations into this act. No one bought any guns because they went and told people, said, what the hell? This guy's trying to sell his guns. What should I do? Do you tell the cops? I don't know. Well, I know what happened. Is that it didn't go to the cops. But it did go to a few elected officials and some DAs that really believe in the rule of law, even when the cops break it. So there was that. So the idea of going online and being an agent provocateur with this administration? Of course, we already know that Trump's whole MO in his grievance is to dox and gather Oppo research on his rivals or critics. I would say that this program is already in force because that kid going to Harvard who was prevented to until they had to reverse course because of the international and national public outcry. They wouldn't let him come in because of his social media posts by his friends. Probably said something. Remember when Obama was president? He was great. This guy now, God, what's up? That's enough to keep you out of this country and enough to put you on the list. Sarah Ann Lynch of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A unit of the largest U.S. Public Employees Union has filed a complaint with the Justice Department's Inspector General, alleging that an appointee of Donald Trump may be improperly using political criteria gleaned from social media to remove people who have expressed views contrary to Trump's from participating in the process of awarding grants to organizations that provide services to victims of crime. The confidential complaint focuses on Darlene Hutchinson Beale, a Republican from Alabama, according to a union official who described it to Reuters. No wonder there was a storm a-brewing in Alabama. I wonder what was on Trump's mind. The mind reels. Back to the article. Hutchinson Beale was appointed by Trump in 2017 as director of the Office for Victims of Crime, affectionately known as the OVC. And that is a part of the Justice Department which compensates victims of crime and awards grants to local governments, nonprofits, and other organizations that assist victims of crime such as human trafficking. Most of the money from the grants comes from funds collected from convicted felons, although grants to help provide services to human trafficking victims come from taxpayer funds. The complaint alleges that Hutchinson Beale has been scrutinizing the social media accounts of peer reviewers who are paid experts who make non-binding recommendations to help ensure that the competitive grants are awarded in a fair and impartial manner. Well, that's not how it's done in Trump's business world, fair and impartial. But she'd been doing this to see if their views were aligned with the Trump administration's policies on immigration, or if they openly supported the legalization of prostitution. Hutchinson Beale was then using that information to determine who should serve as a reviewer, according to the complaint. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 2830, which represents employees inside the Office of Justice Programs, filed its complaint on August 16th and asked for an investigation into the matter. The complaint also raises concerns about the grant peer review process in one other Justice Department office. The complaint includes copies of internal documents showing a list of peer reviewers' names, with a column next to each in which Hutchinson Beale made notes showing she had looked up people's profiles on LinkedIn and Twitter, according to the union official. Some employees believe the rejection of some peer reviewers was primarily based on views expressed on social media, the complaint alleges. Reuters could not determine whether the peer reviewers whom Hutchinson Beale excluded had made posts on social media expressing their views on immigration or prostitution, and of course, Hutchinson Beale declined to comment. A Justice Department official who spoke on condition of anonymity said Hutchinson Beale is screening peer reviewers and occasionally looking at social media profiles, but denied she was making politically motivated decisions. Her focus is on ensuring that every peer reviewer has the appropriate expertise to review the grant. Of course, the appropriate expertise is being loyal and showing abject and complete fealty to Duma Adani. Final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of Foreign Policy magazine and written by Colum Lynch and Robbie Grammer. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan is acknowledging having failed to act more vigorously to shield State Department staffers from retaliation by the Trump administration for their perceived political views. But Sullivan said that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo lacked the authority to fire a top Trump political appointee accused of inflicting or abetting the alleged harassment. Speaking in a town hall meeting on August 29th with staffers from the State Department's Bureau of International Organization Affairs, Sullivan and David Hale, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and the third-ranking official in the department, acknowledged the shortcomings in their response and pledged to make amends for staffers whose careers were upended in a long-running controversy that triggered an investigation by the department's Inspector General. They also pledged to exercise greater personal oversight over the Bureau's work. I will be the first to admit the failure on my part to have done more to address the situation, Sullivan told the gathering, according to an account of the meeting relayed to Foreign Policy magazine. Hale encouraged staffers whose careers were damaged as a result of political retaliation to come to him to seek some sort of professional remedy, or if they preferred, to pursue a formal grievance against the department. I'd like to help. I'd also like people to know they can come to me, Hale said. He pledged to take their case to the Undersecretary of State for Management, the Director General, or Human Resources to make amends. We'll put a little note in your file. You can take it to your next employer one day. There's absolutely no doubt that what was going on was completely unacceptable, Hale said. Misconduct is a soft word, frankly, for the use for what has occurred. The meeting came just weeks after the State Department's Office of the Inspector General concluded that Kevin Moley, the Assistant Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs, and a senior advisor, Mary Stull, had engaged in inappropriate practices, including the disrespectful and hostile treatment of employees and harassment of career employees, premised on claims that they were disloyal based on their perceived political views. The Inspector General, Steve Linick, recommended corrective action and unspecified disciplinary action against Moley. Sullivan said that he had intentionally not invited Moley, who remains in his job, to the session in order to encourage staffers in the Bureau to speak frankly about their concerns and expectations for change in the Bureau. He said the department is still weighing the Inspector General's recommendation that Moley be disciplined, but he said that Pompeo had no power to replace Moley. Stoll left the State Department in January and is no longer subject to disciplinary proceedings. Where is she? Is she in another part of government? Or is she a lobbyist now? Where is she? This reporter would like to know. The secretary can't fire an assistant secretary appointed by a president, so it adds a layer of complexity there, Sullivan said. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it easier to tolerate, but know that the experience we've had with this situation has sensitized, I know. It sensitized Ambassador Hale and myself, and the secretary, and of the need for us to do better. Both Moley and Stoll vehemently deny many of the allegations leveled against them. Moley issued a lengthy rebuttal to the allegations outlined in the report, directly denying some of the allegations, and in other instances saying he was unaware of actions taken against career diplomats. Sharpie marks next to career staffers' names. I don't know anything about Sharpie marks next to career staffers' names. You saw Sharpie marks? I don't know anything about Sharpie marks. Well, that brings us to our break period, and we better get on with that break. And when we come back, we will be going through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christine Herman. Got a minute? Polyurethane. It's used to make seat cushions, memory foam, paint, and myriad other products. Unfortunately, due to its widespread use, more than 1 million tons of polyurethane waste end up in U.S. landfills each year. It's not that easy to recycle polyurethane, so the main alternative to just tossing the stuff is incineration. However,
incineration produces toxic byproducts, requires a lot of heat, so a lot of energy input to bring it down to something that you can get rid of.
University of Illinois chemistry professor Steve Zimmerman. He and his team therefore set out to tweak the molecules that make up polyurethane to make it easier for it to be converted into other useful materials. The molecular tweaking involves inserting a chemical linker known as an acetal into one of the components that make up polyurethanes found in rubber bands, packaging, and car parts. The acetal linker readily cleaves in the presence of acid.
So we're breaking it down to materials that are actually different than we started with. And so what we're doing is using those to make other polyurethanes.
In the particular process recently presented by Zimmerman's grad student Ephraim Morato at the National Meeting of the American Chemical Society in San Diego, the new polyurethanes behave like superglue.
And it actually works better than superglue.
The biggest hurdle to widespread use is the cost. But Zimmerman hopes further research will cut costs down so that the glue-making method will really stick. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christine Herman.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey, kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
If you like sugar, the full-page photograph in the recent New York Times Magazine of a typical enormous chain store candy display should warm your heart, but the accompanying headline and story should send shudders up and down your spine. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The article, part of the 1619 Project, is written by Harvard professor Khalil Gibran Muhammad, and the large font text in the page facing the photo says, quote, "The sugar that saturates the American diet has a barbaric history as the white gold that fueled slavery." As Muhammad writes, quote, "Most of these stories of brutality, torture, and premature death have never been told in classroom textbooks or historical museums. They have been refined and whitewashed in the mills and factories of Southern folklore, the Romantic South, the Lost Cause, the popular Moonlight and Magnolias plantation tours so important to Louisiana's agritourism today. Also, as of today, Americans on average consume 75 to 80 pounds of sugar a year. Today, the sugarcane farming business, for the most part, excludes African Americans. Today, the tentacles and remnants of sugar slavery continue. And this story about sugar should appropriately leave a bad taste in your mouth. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
If it's class warfare, we're the People's Army.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
There's a hunter's nightmare in which a group of them flush some rabbits out of the brush. But rather than scampering away, the furry bunnies turn toward their stalkers. "Run!" shouts one of the hunters. "Run for your life! The rabbits have guns!" Arming animals would make the sport of hunting a bit more sporting, wouldn't it? Well, what if we did give all wildlife a fighting chance against the destructive firepower of profiteers who so carelessly ravage their habitats and kill them off? Of course, we can't arm nature with guns, but we could recognize that other species and ecosystems are living creatures with intrinsic legal rights to exist and flourish, thus giving nature its day in court to defend its own well-being. Like us humans, the lakes, forests, wildlife, etc., could have legal status to sue and be represented by lawyers to protect themselves from mindless exploitation, injury, and death. This rights of nature concept is already being applied in such countries as Ecuador and New Zealand, and more than 36 U.S. cities and towns have passed ordinances acknowledging that various natural resources in their areas have inherent rights to take polluters and other despoilers to court. Ironically, the corporate powers, who have perverted law, logic, and nature to have their lifeless profiteering entities declared persons, are aghast that Mother Nature can have rights that can counter the corporate claim that their right to profit is absolute. This is Jim Hightower saying, at its core, the rights of nature movement is asserting the obvious. Earth's biosphere is not a free candy store for our taking. We are one with the natural world and must find ways to cooperate fully with it for our own survival. To learn more and connect to action, go to Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, www.celdf.org, celdf.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What are your plans for Labor Day weekend? Are you going to enjoy a barbecue with family and friends? Or maybe march with your union in a parade? Do you know the history of this holiday? On this day in labor history, the year was 1882. The first Labor Day celebration took place in New York City. 10,000 workers marched in a parade from City Hall to Union Square, then uptown to 42nd Street. Afterwards, there was a picnic, concert, and speeches. The workers included in their festivities a demand for the 8-hour day. The Labor Day events were organized by the New York Central Labor Union, an umbrella group of local union representatives. Workers wanted to show the strength of the emerging labor movement and push for improvements in working conditions. By 1884, Labor Day was celebrated in 23 states. The labor movement was growing and gaining even more attention after the 1894 Pullman strike. According to the AFL-CIO, in what most historians call an election year attempt to appease workers after the federal crackdown on the Pullman strike, shortly after the strike was broken, President Grover Cleveland signed legislation making the first Monday in September Labor Day, a federal holiday. Interestingly, May 1st is traditionally considered International Workers' Day. President Cleveland did not want workers commemorating such events as the Haymarket tragedy, so he proposed that the holiday take place the first Monday in September. Today, far too few people remember Labor Day's union origins. People now see Labor Day as the unofficial end of summer. In an era when labor union membership has dwindled and far too many workers are not unionized, it is a time to remember the history of this worker-inspired holiday. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Currently have a little bit of a rain squall, though we are too far inland to have a squall. But electrical and thunderstorm activity is in the area, dropping rain on us and around. Of course, we are in a red flag warning. Some of this lightning could be hitting dry areas with not enough water to put it out, but our hope is that it will. Currently, winds are out of the southwest, light and variable. We'll be picking up out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we will have rain showers along with some thunderstorm activity on and off throughout the day. Programming note, when there's electrical activity here in Southern Oregon, it may kick the mothership offline for only however long it takes the modem to reset. So if that happens, just refresh your browser and we'll be back in a moment. Hopefully that won't be the case. We've taken some precautions to mitigate those issues, but if it happens, you know what to do. Grass pollen is still rated at none. The air quality index has gone up some to 39 parts per million, but is still in that good range. And the daytime UV index is high, and it is in its second day at 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at the moment at 29.94 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 77%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 66 and sunny. Paris is 66 and partly cloudy. Rome is 88 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kiev is 72 and fair. Kabul is 82 and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 79 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and cloudy with a wind advisory offshore and on the bay for small craft, of course. And New York, New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. I don't think Dorian's getting to them this weekend, but do take care and batten down the hatches. It's a-comin'. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Stephanie Nebahay, Gabrielle Stargarder, and Aislinn Lang of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Brazilian President Bolsonaro caused friction with regional ally Chile when he accused its former leader, Michelle Bachelet, of meddling in Brazil's affairs by criticizing rising police violence and erosions of democracy. How dare you interfere with our internal affairs to turn this country into a right-wing fascist government, as we all so remember it so very fondly. We want it back. Bolsonaro, a far-right former army captain, reacted furiously by comments by Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who was tortured under the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet and was the first female Chilean president. Bachelet told reporters she was concerned by a jump in killings by Rio de Janeiro police, backtracking on democratic norms, and attacks on indigenous communities amid a rise in Amazon forest fires that have been a point of contention between Bolsonaro and leaders including French President Emmanuel Macron. Bachelet is following Macron's line and meddling in domestic affairs and Brazilian sovereignty, Bolsonaro wrote on Facebook. She attacks Brazil with the agenda of the human rights of criminals, attacking our valiant police. Wow, he's a little mini-me autocrat, isn't he? Bolsonaro also personally attacked Bachelet, whose father, an Air Force general, remained loyal to Socialist President Salvador Allende after the 1973 coup in Chile and died in jail. Bachelet forgets that the only reason her country isn't like Cuba is thanks to those who had the courage to put a stop to the left in 1973. Among those communists was her father. Wow. You know, these right-wingers are so cruel. Cruelty is the point. Cruelty is always the point. And to former army captains, cruelty is all it takes to make them feel like a big man.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The former First Lady of Honduras, Rosa Elena Bonilla, wife of ex-President Porfirio Lobo, was sentenced yesterday, Wednesday, to 58 years in jail on charges of fraud and undue appropriation of funds. Bonilla, 52, has been in custody since February of 2018. Her defense attorney said Bonilla was innocent. An appeal would be filed with the Central American nation Supreme Court. That would be Bonilla's last chance to avoid serving out her sentence. The former First Lady was sentenced to 58 years in jail for crimes of undue appropriation of funds and fraud, said Supreme Court spokesman Carlos Silva. Bonilla was accused of misusing the equivalent of almost $800,000 in funds between 2010 and 2014 that came from international donations and public funds, and which were meant to be used for social programs, according to an investigation carried out by Attorney General's office and a unit of the Organization of American States. Bonilla used the money to pay for medical bills, jewelry, tuition for her children, and construction work. What? Not thousands of shoes? The court also sentenced Bonilla's close associate, Saul Escobar, to a 48-year jail sentence for embezzlement of public funds and fraud. Even if Bonilla and Escobar do manage to overturn or reduce their jail sentences, they will only serve a maximum of 30 years, which is the maximum allowed by Honduran law. Lobo, who governed Honduras between 2010 and 2014, has also been linked to the Cachiros criminal organization in trials in the U.S. and has rejected the accusations. Though one of Lobo's sons did plead guilty in 2017 before a U.S. court to conspiring to import cocaine into the United States and was sentenced to 24 years in prison. The tree, the apple, and the good wife. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The French 77s will be pouring We need it. We want it. And we're going to get it. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.